Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar. My name is Eric and we are going to get started here in just a minute. We're just waiting for everybody else to kind of file into the webinar here, and then Al and I will get started here in just a minute. So stand by for just a moment, and maybe in about 1 to 2 minutes we'll get rolling.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll be starting momentarily.
All right, it seems to sort of stabilize now at a number, so I think that'll work out. All right, so let's get started. We'll dive right in here, kind of get going. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to first talk a little bit about us, so that way you kind of have a little bit of background as to who we are and why we're even doing this kind of webinar. Then we'll get into a little bit of some questions that have come up and kind of get into the meat and potatoes of pilot hiring and more or less where the data is suggesting it's going to go. And really, I think the end result is what you need to do to focus on to get yourself in a position to be hireable. And then at the end, we'll open up to questions that you can put in the box down below there, and then we can field questions from the audience at the end. So to kind of get things kick-started, once again, my name is Eric Noel. I work for AeroGuard Flight Training Center. We are a flight academy based here in Phoenix, Arizona, and then we have our headquarters is in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have campuses across the country from Southern California through Texas and Florida. We primarily focus on career-oriented flight training. So the majority of what we do is kind of airline-focused training. And as a result, the way we do training is very much similar to kind of airline operations and being highly structured and kind of standardized in how everything works. What I do for the organization is work to build pipeline programs for aviators to get into various careers for around the world. And so I'm going to, for all intents and purposes, kind of MC this thing a little bit. Really, the star of the show is Mr. Al Timpower here. He is with, well, actually, I'll let you introduce yourself. You're with Flight Path Vectors. Yep. And yeah, Al, you take it away. You kind of talk a little bit about who you are and your background.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. My name is Al Timpower. I'm one of the members of Flight Path Vectors. We're an organization that helps pilots kind of achieve their goals, mentor them all the way through to get to the airline job that they're looking for. For myself, right now, I'm a first officer of a major airline. I've worked in the airline industry for many, many years in many different capacities. So it's given me a unique opportunity to see things from contract negotiations, pilot hiring, development of specific programs within the airline industry themselves. There's 4 of us within the airline industry and at Flight Path Vectors. Unfortunately, the other 3, they can't be here. We are all active pilots within the airline industry. So the other 3 are actually out flying and they're working. So that gives us a unique understanding, a unique view that we are currently within the major airlines and within the regional airlines in many different capacities other than just flying the line, whether it be a check airman, whether it be in the interview hiring side or special programs. So again, it gives Flight Path Vector a breadth of knowledge outside of just flying the line. So we gather that information that and the experience we've had over the decades to kind of help people achieve their goals. So we kind of have that inside view to help you make the correct decisions to, guide your career.
Excellent. And I think we have a little bit more information just about Flight Path Vectors in general. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of your mission, your goal at Flight Path Vectors?
So for Flight Path Vectors, again, because we have been in the industry, whether it be in again, hiring or in training pilots at the airline level, we've kind of seen that there's been some pitfalls that are there that affect pilots that they just don't know where to go. So what we did, the four of us, both Phil Green and Micah and Joni and myself, is we created this entity to help pilots. We help them kind of give them the information they need to make those decisions to be successful, to actually be proactive in their career and give them a purpose and a direction rather than just saying, well, I have 1,500 hours. Is that good enough? It's just, you don't know what you don't know. So what we're doing is we're getting the most pertinent, recent information to help them achieve their goals so that they're not, just going through the motions and not exactly understanding that what they're doing right now is affecting them, 1, 2, 3 years down the road. And, it's just prolonging what they're doing versus being proactive in their career. So, and we help mentor those pilots to kind of guide them along and be successful where they're going. And when they're doing that, they become very, very successful and they become very sought after pilots when we talk about things like soft skills, communication skills, leadership skills. Those are the things that we're actually showing. I mean, everyone's coming to the table knowing how to fly the plane. Let's be honest. It's those that differentiate themselves is what the airlines are looking for.
Very good. I think from my own kind of outside perspective, I think one of another major contributor in the value that Flight Path Vectors offers is sort of the efficiency to getting to where you want to be, right? Meaning, you don't spend a lot of time milling about trying to apply to a bunch of airlines and try to get on. It's like a shooting into a dark alley and just randomly.
Absolutely.
How do you hit your target?
Absolutely. I mean, most people come into the industry saying, I want to be a pilot and I want to go here, but they don't understand the path, how to get there. And they're kind of stumbling, saying, well, if I do this, will I get there? Or will I do A, B, C, will I get there? Not understanding that, well, that's not necessarily the path for that specific airline. This airline is looking for these set of skills versus this other entity is looking for these set of skills. And kind of, all these airlines have their own flavors and their own strengths and weaknesses, what they're looking for. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the wherewithal. And there's some people joining the industry that, just don't understand the airline industry in general. So these are the things that we at Flight Path Vector kind of help. We help guide them. We help guide candidates forward. We help them produce, their career, to be a good steward of their career. So, and Flight Path Vectors is working with AeroGuard because I think we're on the same sheet of music as making sure that we're setting up these candidates for success for the long haul, not just I'm passing this check ride or that check ride. It's more than that.
Excellent. All right, good. So let's kind of dive into where we are now, kind of present day. So I think if anybody is watching any news about aviation right now, one of the big things, at least in the U.S. especially, is airlines are starting to hire. I mean, I don't think that a lot of the cargo companies, for example, ever really stopped, but I think the news around some of those other airlines hiring is kind of a big deal. And so at this point now, I think there's, I don't know, what is there, like 14, 12, I don't know, something, more than 10 airlines currently actively hiring.
Absolutely. And again, the airline industry is, a major industry in the United States. I mean, let's establish some baseline. Yes, the COVID was absolutely unprecedentedly, had a harsh impact on the industry. Yes, and that made a lot of news. A lot of doom and gloom was very much out there. Pre-COVID, on top of that, if he was going to talk about aircraft specific, there's certain airframes that were having problems, and that had an effect. And then COVID came up and actually had something more to offer, negatively, mind you. So, with that being said, the airlines have parked a lot of airplanes. Airlines have furloughed pilots, specifically pilots. Airlines have been in the news in a negative light. That being said, the turnaround that we are seeing is not garnering enough media, I would say, or fanfare. There's other things that are more exciting to say, but airlines are recovering. Airlines are ordering airplanes. Airlines are establishing new pathway programs. An airline has actually established a fairly sizable airline has established a pathway program with another school. Airlines don't do these things without the projection of growth, without the projection of making money. In conjunction with pilots, airlines are now hiring other employees that require to fly, flight attendants, mechanics. They're actively hiring in the thousands. Right now, it's a projection for 2021. And, it's fairly easy to go to any airline and go to their career section to see exactly what they're hiring and where they're hiring at. I mean, that's not a secret anywhere. The cargo operations through 2021 has had an amazing year. 2020 was not a bad year for the cargo operators, whether it's going to be Prime Air, UPS, FedEx. They were hiring all through 2020. It was a great time to be one of those entities, and they're projecting again to have very lucrative years, probably for the foreseeable future. They have aircraft on orders, and again, with everyone seeing what's happening as far as cargo and moving cargo forward, it's just a steady progression moving there. So if you're looking to go into ATI or Kalita, FedEx, UPS, this market in the aviation sector has had growth. So it's not a bad time to go in there. As far as the 121 or the air carriers, things are moving a little bit slower. If there's some noted things, some of the major airlines are recalling their furloughs or recalling their voluntary pilots to come back. They're getting their aircraft out of storage. As a matter of fact, they can't get them out of storage fast enough. On top of that, again, the hiring of flight crew members is on the rise. So what does that mean for all those pilots out there wanting to get in the airlines? Well, any movement on the major side is good because it's going to move on the regional side. And right now, the regional airlines, they're moving. They're accepting new airplanes. There's growth there. The major partners have actually went to the regionals for increased flying, and some of the regionals have turned it down because they can't do it. They've said, hey, we don't have the personnel to do it at this time. They can't recall their people fast enough. Their training centers are full. They can't get pilots online fast enough.
Yeah, I think, and that's why maybe you see on the list of who's currently hiring right now, a lot of these regional airlines are listed, and probably more are going to keep popping up every week. You're probably going to see more and more pop up.
Absolutely. So the one thing, just to be full disclosure in the airlines will not slowly kind of phase this in. I mean, it would be, I would say it's a fair bet that it'll be a day-to-day thing where, next Monday, all the airlines say, hey, we're hiring, start applying. It's not going to be hey, here's what's coming up. The airlines typically haven't done that. And the reason we know that is, 9/11, 2008 recession. It wasn't something where the airlines come out and say, hey, we're going to be hiring in 2 weeks. Hey, we're going to be hiring in a month from now. They just don't. They'll just one day open up the doors. We're going to start hiring and move forward from that. And that's fairly a standard practice. Historically, history has proven that. So it's those who are prepared for when that door opens are the ones who are going to be in the front and getting in versus the ones that are, I'm going to wait until that happens and then I'll start my career, so to speak, to get hired. So
good. So let's, I guess, focus. We'll kind of transition to. We've talked a little bit about maybe what will drive continued hiring, but do you want to speak a little bit more towards how you think that might progress through the rest of 2021? And we know who's currently hiring. We kind of talked about the cargo side. On the major airline side, what do you think will drive the hiring there?
So on the major airline side, a couple of things have been happening. There's been an increase in block hours or flights or new markets that have come up, and they've announced it. It's not it hasn't been anything that's hidden, but the actual pace at which they're coming up, major airlines have actually stepped up their pace so that there's been a lot of last minute flying that's been actually going to the major airlines. And speaking with other other carriers and whatnot, there's actually been, opportunities for pilots right now to make excess money because that flying has come up. The personnel have not been brought online quick enough, so there's excess opportunity to make a little extra money, versus historic. Now, on the other side, because some of the major airlines have actually extended to the regional airlines, hey, we're bringing these flights online. Will you fly these flights? And again, I've talked to some of the regionals. They haven't been able to capitalize on that because they just don't have the personnel. So the flying is out there. The flying is coming. The numbers as far as passenger seat miles being available has gone up. Specifically in this last month, 10 months ago we were looking at in the 100 to 150,000 passengers per day, and I think 2 days ago we're up to 1.6 million passengers per day in the span of 8 to 10 months. Right. And we can talk about that. We'll talk about later about international versus domestic. We have that breakdown. What does that mean for hiring? Well, it's just a matter of time. It is quite frankly just a matter of time, and the airlines will run as long as they can with the people they have until it becomes a tipping point where we need more people. We need more people now. Airlines are very much reactive and not proactive, and that's just how it is.
I think, I think a big piece of this as well is maybe the main players that tend to get a lot of attention, at least like in the news, would be some of our legacy carriers that have a huge focus on the international side of things. And so their development is not necessarily going to be as pronounced as maybe some of the low-cost carriers that fly primarily domestically throughout the U.S., right?
Yes. Domestic travel is definitely king right now. International travel is slower. I was just in Mexico the other day, and I had a very good conversation with some people in Mexico. Given the requirement for COVID tests to come back in, I think talking to this gentleman, he said in all the major spots in Mexico that he was keenly aware of, Mexico is now on those resorts. The resorts are picking up the tab for the COVID tests. They want you to travel down there. They're making sure that they have dedicated COVID at the individual resorts. They're trying to make it as easy for international travel. They want travel from the United States to these spots. So, it's making it easier with the new normal, if you will, as far as travel is concerned. I don't see it as too far off where international travel is going to actually start, making accommodations, identifying where they can make it easier for the travelers to travel. They're actually doing that. Even when going into customs within the United States, it was not as stringent as it was a year ago. So
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm sure vaccinations and all of that will play into some new legislation that will allow for travel to happen without massive quarantines and this kind of thing.
Sure, and I'm seeing passenger travel. I mean, I've been to Mexico a few times, and before it was about half. Mm-hmm. So lots of times Mexico it was full going, full coming back. Wow. So and it was funny. It was just remarking how many U.S. carriers were in Mexico versus how many domestic Mexican carriers we saw at the gates. It was unbelievable. So passenger confidence is coming back. I don't think that the international side will be on par with the domestic side. That's just my own personal opinion. Mm-hmm. I still think the domestic travel is going to be the biggest growth. What does that mean? Well, regional airlines are going to grow. Mm-hmm. That's just how the numbers shake out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly the case. Do you think, I guess there is sort of like a cap though that people sometimes identify with the regional airlines in terms of like the scope clause that they have with their major airlines. Do you think we'll ever kind of run into that cap and have to worry about that?
Well, the scope clause, is it just for all those who are coming out, is an agreement between a major carrier and a partner as to how many airplanes they can fly, the seat capacities, the route structure, and whatnot. It's an agreement that they have to make it's with the pilot unions and whatnot. So historically, it has been a point of contention between pilot groups, but it's a business option that they use, to keep airlines afloat. Now, will it butt up against the scope clause? Well, it depends on the carrier. Every carrier has a different scope clause and what the requirements are, type of aircraft, hubs, routes, and whatnot. Could it be a problem? Yes, absolutely. It always has been a problem. Will the airlines come back and renegotiate scope clauses? I probably will. Which way will it go? I don't know. It could be more restrictive or it could be freed up. It all depends on the language that the scope clause is going to offer between the individual carriers. Now, is that important to look at as far as tuning in to say, hey, where do I want to go as an airline? Yes, that is something you need to educate yourself with and kind of look at, because it has a direct correlation to, your quality of life, where you'll be flying, job security, etc. So you have to look at that. Absolutely. Do I see a change? Do I think there'll be a change? Probably, but it will not be an overnight change. There's a process by which scope clauses are negotiated and settled. So, but it's something you got to be aware of and pay attention to. Excellent. Okay. So a little bit more on some of the data piece, I think, around the hiring, and I think it's mostly based on observation, right? So what are you seeing now, or you guys at Flightpath Vectors, what are you noticing across the industry that are key indicators of how much growth we can expect, and therefore pilot hiring we can expect? So let's take us a little bit at a time to kind of paint a big picture. So the first thing we're looking at, we all know that airlines have parked a lot of planes. I mean, the planes have been sitting all over the country, the desert, everywhere. Some planes are permanently retired. Some have been put into storage. And talking with the maintenance side, we do have, quite a few relationships with maintenance people in several airlines. Right now, one of the choke points is getting these airplanes out quick enough. So you can't just pull an airplane out of storage and say, yep, there it is, take the paint off, the plastic off it, it's back in service to fly. There's a whole process by which to get these aircraft out of storage, prepped for airline service, and certified, and back online to fly. So right now, they don't have enough maintenance people to pull them out fast enough. They don't have enough space available, hangar space, to get them out and get them back into service. So the airlines have are starting to expedite their number of aircraft available for service. So some airlines, they're saying, hey, we're going to do X amount a week. They've now increased it to, almost double of what the requirement is, because they're seeing the need that's coming up. And right now, the big target's the summer. And they're trying to get as many airplanes out and available for the summer rush as possible. So there's that. The other thing is, again, the major airlines, specifically with their regional partners, have just had some discussion about, hey, let's start shifting some of these routes over to the regionals. And again, the regionals are accepting some of it, but not all of it. They're having problems themselves as far as staffing. The regionals are, some regionals are taking delivery of aircraft this year for new markets. That's not a secret. That's something that's been widely publicized, and they're still on track to actually do that. Hiring of other flight crews. So some airlines are hiring a lot more flight attendants right now than they historically have, and they're hiring mechanics, for this impending rush. If you looked at some other airlines, there's new markets that are being serviced. Some have already started this year. Some are making moves to start other markets. If you really want to see the real in-depth, start looking at airlines and looking where they're hiring ground personnel. There's new markets, and you say, wow, I can't believe this airline's flying. Look at where they're looking for jobs. So just look at a state and say, hey, wow, I didn't believe this airline's going to the state. They're hiring for ground personnel. So yeah, it's a new market that's coming up. Aircraft orders. There's a major airline that just made a bid to buy 737 Maxes. So airlines are not going to buy airplanes unless they have a market for it, and they're not going to even look at it unless it's something that's immediately beneficial to them. So they're looking at that. So again, we talked about passenger travel numbers. Historically, we can look at 2019. 2019 is a historic year for passenger travel. It's, the historic high. We were doing 2.6, 2.5 million passengers a day in this same time, 2019. Whereas, on the fifth, we're up about 1.6. So it's a little bit lower than historic numbers, not quite up to snuff as the 2019 numbers, but we're still on that trend, a very sharp trend moving to higher numbers. And again, it's all indicative that everyone's looking at what's going to happen in the summer. The other thing is furloughs. I'm sure I'm happy to see that pilots are actually being recalled, and or if they have their furlough notification, we're told, hey, rip it up. You're not being furloughed, which is fabulous. And the pilots that are on leave are being called back. So, those who took the voluntary leave for 6 months, 1 year, they didn't get it. They're being called back already. So to see what the schedule is for that, it's indicative that we're moving forward to a point now where hiring off the street is inevitable.
I think piggybacking off of that, what is also interesting then is a lot of these things are sort of being primed, right? So training departments at various airlines then they're now working overtime. So when they're ready to hire, they're going to be able to put new hire classes through at a pretty high rate, I would imagine, because they're already preparing for that now, basically, with trying to bring their shows back online as is.
Sure. And one of the things, it's kind of I wouldn't call it a sick hobby. One of the things we do at Flight Path Vectors is we actually look at airlines and we actually look at where they're hiring. We actually go to, it's not a secret to see airlines post their jobs and what they're looking for, where they're looking for, and the exact positions they're looking for. And there's certain airlines out there, they're hiring specifically for flight operations, which is pilots, flight operations, HR, or anything to do with HR related for pilots. Historically, COVID happened, they furloughed those teams, they got rid of some of the excess trim from those departments, and now that they're coming back, they're hiring from the street to fill those positions quickly because they can't fill them in internally. So now they're looking to the street to hire for those positions. So which hasn't happened since probably 2009, 2010.
Sure. And a lot of times also other parts of the flight operations side, whether that be flight attendants, right, and
absolutely,
ramp workers and this kind of thing, is also a key indicator that they're trying to grow in certain areas.
So so if you want to see where airlines are growing, go look at their career section and go see where they're hiring and what they're hiring for. So I know it's kind of dry and most people don't want to sit there and look at that, but it'll give you a good indicator of who's doing what where, and kind of see where the growth is happening. Or if they're hiring for this area, airlines will not hire unless it's a need.
That's fair. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't want to bring more personnel on than they needed, right?
Absolutely. One of the major costs of airlines is staffing costs. So, again, people were furloughed. People are being called back.
Sure. So something I think is interesting that I don't see talked about very often is not just about the passenger side. I think a lot of people kind of got caught on that with like the TSA now coming out with that data all the time, every day, and this kind of thing. But I think what also is interesting from the perspective of a pilot maybe is also just how much flying those airlines are doing. And so a key airline metric for that is available seat miles. So how many seats is this airline flying, whether they're full or not, right? How many seats available do they have? And so I think that's a pretty good indicator. I think that might be more closely related to the demand for pilots, for example, because if they're going to do more flights, then they obviously have to have more people to fly them, right?
Correct. Well, they have more seats available for the for the public to use. Absolutely.
Sure.
So again, I don't know if you can see this graph. Again, domestic travel is far outpacing our international. It just is. And by all metrics that we've been looking at in Flight Path Vectors is international is going to be very slow to bring back. Unfortunately, that's just the metrics that they're showing. It's going to increase. Numbers are trending up, but not at the pace of domestic travel. That's just how it is. Now, what does that mean? Well, major carriers that have a strong reliance on international travel, it's going to grow slower than domestic. So who does the most domestic travel in the United States? The regional airlines. Low cost carriers. They do the bulk of all the domestic hauling. So if that's the case, where do you think the growth is going to be?
In those airlines.
In those airlines. So, and that's just looking at aircraft numbers and available seat miles. The other thing is you start looking at numbers as far as completion factor and whatnot. I mean, we're doing very good this year in that we have, almost a 90% completion factor for 2021 so far. So very few flights are canceling this year. So which means, there's more people traveling. Hey, there's more emphasis on getting these people to where they need to go. Hey, let's get them moving. So that's actually really good, because it's typically, you have a higher number of flights canceling for whatever reason. But for right now, we have an excess of personnel. Hey, the airplanes are not breaking. They're fixed. They're getting moving. And, we've had some good flying weather. A couple of hiccups here and there, but
some crazy winter storms.
We had to winter storms, but for the most part, we're having good flying to get people where they need to go.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's kind of the things we want to see for sure. So let's kind of change. We know that hiring is already here and that it's not going to go anywhere. If anything, it's going to become more robust through the rest of this year and then exit 2022 and 2023. So the question is then, what I suppose we want to work towards. What do we need to do to get into hiring mode? I think one step is to recognize who you're competing with for these jobs.
Absolutely.
So it kind of depends on where you are in the career and what you're looking to ultimately do. But can we dive a little bit into who your competition is in comparison to? So you kind of have a sense of how big that space is, and you can kind of figure out then how you're going to start to set yourself apart.
Okay, so unfortunately, COVID, has put the final nail in the coffin for a few airlines. I mean, that's just how it is. And there's, right now they're saying, numbers are suggesting anywhere from, 37 to 4,400 pilots were affected. Right. That were, they were Part 121 carrier service. They were, they have a jet type rating, maybe a few. Yeah. And now they're on the street, so to speak, and or flying in other capacities, whether they went to corporate, whether they went to somewhere else.
Sure.
But those pilots are, very, very sought after, let's say.
Okay.
So, for them to move to a major airline, they're going to be top tier candidates that major airlines want to look for. There's that. The other thing is, pilots that are coming to the regional airlines, I understand 2018, 2019, it was fairly easy to get a job at a regional airline. You had to have, your restricted ATP or your 1500s. Man, you were going to get a job. It's not going to be that way. It's not going to be the same metric of, you have your ATP, you're good to go. Airlines can afford for the next little bit, not forever, they can afford for the next little bit to be choosy. They can select their best candidates for the positions they're looking for. And that's just how it is. If candidates are, well-rounded, trained, and current, currency is a big thing. They stand to have a better chance to be in the front of this hiring. I'm not going to say it's a wave, but in this hiring endeavor right now. So those airline pilots that are out there, as far as a flight instructor is concerned, you have some stiff competition. So it's what are you going to be doing to differentiate yourself? Airlines are now focusing on more what's called, the well-rounded pilot, not just a hourly based something. I have X amount of type ratings and hours. What are you doing to differentiate? Do you have specific leadership training? Have you done things as far as service? Have you done anything as to better where you're at right now? Like, I'm a program director for whatever. I started this program at the entity I'm at right now. Those are the things that show the initiative that they're looking for. So if you can do that, you're going to be several notches ahead of someone who just has the hourly requirements. So as far as flight instructors, are you a Gold Seal flight instructor? Are you a standards pilot? Are you a check airman at your flight school? These things will actually weigh heavily in your career versus someone who's just been a flight instructor.
Sure. So I think maybe that works on all ends, right? Whether you're just transitioning from new in your career to your first airline, like a regional airline, or whether you're at a regional airline trying to get on with a major airline. I think in either case,
Sure.
A lot of times, the logbook piece is kind of almost the same across the board, right? You tick all the boxes as far as you need this certificate, you need this thing,
Absolutely.
whatever. What are the things that they're looking for, other things to differentiate you from others?
Absolutely. I mean, airlines are starting to learn that it's more than just a numbers game. It's, where you went to school. That plays a big part of, how successful you are. I don't think it's stated very much, just going to a mom and pop shop, getting your hours is not as lucrative or holds as much water anymore as it does going to a structured program or going to a structured school. It just, where you go to school matters these days. And for the foreseeable future, I think that's going to hold true.
I think that's kind of been true, right? Because the military pilots have long been sought after by a lot of the airlines for that exact reason, because they know consistency in training and they know what they're going to get. Right?
Absolutely. And let's be honest. I mean, there's not a lot of military pilots fighting to leave the military right now to go to the airlines
because COVID has changed things.
Exactly. So, but you have to be a steward of your career and kind of look at all those things and saying, what am I doing to make myself marketable? You're a commodity that they're looking for, and not every pilot is the same. It's not the I can fly a plane. Everyone can fly a plane at this level. So as far as talk about the military guys,
sure.
So for the military pilots, they have a unique pathway where if you're in the military, there's a direct pathway to the airlines, and they have their own. They know people who fly at the airlines. They've flown, they've been in their chain of command, whatever the case may be, and then there's a transition. But there is now been identified a new hardship in the last few years. There's been some pilots who thought, well, I'm going to join the National Guard, get trained or whatever else. I'll go to the airlines. Well, things have kind of slowed down significantly. They're not getting the hours that they want. There's been a lot of furloughed pilots from the major airlines who've gone back into the reserves or National Guard, got orders to stay there for a year, 2 years. And they're higher ranking. They get the flight hours. The most junior guys don't. And so it's kind of slowed things down on their side to get the minimum hours requirements to go to a civilian commercial entity. So, and that's 750 hours.
Right, for your ATP.
For your ATP. I mean, you still have to get that, even though as a military aviator, you've got a significant amount of experience and skills. Those hours are still the requirement. So now we're finding those pilots who are, a couple type ratings. They're flying in the crew environment. They've flown across the Atlantic or the Pacific, and they still don't have that magic 750 hours. And it's going to be a significant amount of time before they build those times to get that ATP.
Right. Well, I mean, to your point, right? They'd have to wait until the guys senior to them in their guard units return back to the airlines. Then they can pick up finally these duty trips, right? And,
sure.
And get orders to be able to go do some flying. And until then, they're kind of stuck with their 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year kind of thing.
That's what they're stuck with. Now, the problem is a lot of those guard pilots, they may be international pilots. They maybe fly 777s, 767s, 787s. And, as we stated before, the international side is going to be a slow growth.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be some time before, those military guys will have the opportunity to, show what they got, so to speak, and come to the civilian side.
Sure.
So the question is going to be, how are they going to bridge that gap? So that's a significant question, just to get those hours, to get them eligible to come over to the civilian side.
Sure. And then that kind of brings in a new market that, I would have never thought, as I went through my flight training, for example, that I was ever going to compete with a military pilot for the same job at a regional airline necessarily.
Yeah.
And now that's something new to sort of consider. How many of those guys, could be out there that I would be nervous, because obviously if they've been flying, C-17s or KC-135s and I've been flying a Piper Archer, there's a pretty big divide in level of experience. Absolutely. And exposure to different, operating experiences. So.
Absolutely. But, on the same token, there's certain skill sets that the military has that they don't teach. That the civilian side has. I've worked with numerous military pilots, great aviators. It's a different type of flying versus, coming to the civilian airlines. Things that you just take for granted in the civilian side, let's talk about holding. Military pilots don't hold. They just don't. It's not the forte. It's something they understand, whatever else, but in practicality, doing it, it's not something they do. So coming over to the civilian side, they still have a little bit of a steep learning curve. Some of the acronyms, some of the nuances on how to do things. For instance, during the pre-flight in the military, it takes a significant amount of time. Upwards hours, debriefing, briefing, in the civilian side, pre-flight, get an airline and ready to go, 25 minutes. And you just have to go and get it done. And the tempo is much different, and the mindset is much different on the civilian side than the military side. So there's a learning curve there. So, moving over, there could be some opportunities for the military guys to kind of bridge that gap before they get there. So,
sure. So I think that kind of leads to that next piece of what are the things that that folks, whether they're from that military, new military kind of dynamic that you just described, or at one of these stages and looking to progress to the next level in their career, what things should they do to start to set themselves apart?
So, okay, let's look at this in two pieces, military and civilian. I'm retired military myself. So there's certain aspects of the military that lend strength to the civilian side. They understand about uniforms. They understand about chain of command. They understand how to be at the right place, punctuality. Mm-hmm. They understand the structure that the airlines use that's directly brought from the military. So they understand that. That's a strength for them. Some operational things that, they don't understand because they don't use it, and it's not in their thought processes on an everyday basis, for the civilian side with the military. Now, that being said, on the civilian side, the military is very big on leadership. You get leadership training from the get-go. You get training as far as communication, because you have to work with several different groups, and the military that's just what they do. On the civilian side, not so much. So the civilian side, the lack and the Achilles heel is going to be some of the communication and the leadership skills that are just because you can fly a plane does not mean you know how to manage a crew.
Yeah.
Just because I fly a plane does not know I can effectively communicate with 4 different work groups to effectively get a flight out on time. So there's that steep learning curve.
Sure.
The other things for both sides of the house is, understanding the hiring processes that the airlines are looking for to best showcase yourself to get that interview. So, that's where we come in and kind of help brush all sides of the house for that.
Sure. So letters of recommendation, these kinds of things, I think, kind of speak towards how you can show that other people have had experience with you, and what they've seen in your performance.
Correct.
Right.
So the letter of recommendation specifically, not all letters of recommendation carry the same weight.
Sure.
So to build a picture, so to speak, of who you are, your character, your professionalism, where you came from, this is all going to speak in conjunction with your resume.
Sure.
So help building that and understanding exactly what that is so that it's pertinent to the interviewer that's interviewing you at the airlines. It helps, you be successful doing that. So, having a recommendation from your neighbor Bob, who knows you since you were 2, doesn't hold the same weight as, a vice president of flight operations who's interacted with you.
Certainly. So, speaking to maybe some of those other soft skills, what if prior to getting into this career, I, worked in management of some other company? Would a letter of recommendation speaking to my leadership skills of a team and something outside of aviation also still benefit me now in trying to get a job at the airlines?
Absolutely. Just to be clear, in an airline job or as a pilot in a 121, 135 carrier, flying an airplane is 30, maybe 40% of what the career entails. The rest of it is people skills. It's analytical skills, aeronautical decision making, or whatever else. Anything we can demonstrate that I have worked with people, whether a team leader, a manager, or whatever else, and I've successfully done that. It really paints a picture of who you are. Again, it's been said, no one's ever became a pilot to say, I want to be a pilot because I want to manage people. I mean, people don't say that, right? But the truth of it as a pilot, you're managing people.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think that's really started to morph. If you think about the traditional pilot from maybe the 60s and the 70s and this kind of era, it was maybe a lot different then than how it is now, where pilots are sort of expected to be the team leader of this entire flight, right? Which
absolutely,
you're kind of the commander of this whole situation to make sure this whole thing is going to.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's not just before it was like you're the pilot commander, everything rests on you. It still is that way, but there's so many hands in the pot now. Right. You have dispatch, maintenance control, your flight attendants, your gate agents, your operation agents. All these different things come into play. Your fueler. How do you sit there and determine, well, I got to speak with these people to increase my fuel load because I've determined the weather requires it. Yeah. Well, how do you do that? You can't just walk up and say, hey, you put gas in the plane. It doesn't work that way. So you have to understand the legalities of it and work with everyone and then justify and explain why everything is happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the piece that especially those looking to get into the industry don't necessarily always understand, that there's so much more to being an airline pilot, and especially in the left seat, than you ever really think about as you go through flight training. And that's kind of been something that I've always found interesting. Flight training it's really just like it's sort of baby step one. Getting a license is not really a true testament to becoming an airline pilot. There is that's maybe 30% of what you're going to need to ultimately be successful.
Absolutely, and just it's been said, and it's cliche, but these are licenses to learn.
Yeah,
and those who really embrace that and learn things outside the flight deck, outside the aviation community, and learn people skills and leadership skills. Those are the ones that ultimately will be first in line and more successful, and will have more direct control of where they go versus those that I'm going to apply everywhere. Whoever calls first, that's where I'm going. I mean, there is that contingent of pilot, and in my experience, do they get going places? Probably. Is it where they really want to be? Probably not. And if you have an opportunity to take control of your career and guide your boat, so to speak, then do it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think especially once again, as I went through my flight training, it was something where there's always this idea, like, if I'm the best stick and rudder guy, I'm definitely getting the job. But the reality is that's not even how interviews work anymore.
very little to do with you getting hired anywhere, to be honest. So there's been, in recent years, there's been a definite shift away from the, is that a good person or not?
Yeah.
More is, hey, everything more is situationally based. Tell me a time of this. Tell me a time. What would you do with this? Hey, have you ever, disagreed with your boss and how'd you handle it?
Mm-hmm.
It's situated that kind of brings out who you are, and what's in your wheelhouse. I don't think they're going to be like, well, what did you do if the airplane was a 15-degree bank and you had this pattern? That's not it at all. Very little comes into, the airplanes that you're flying.
Certainly. Okay. So we'll kind of wrap this up here. We'll kind of talk about I think what folks should probably try to do next steps, and then we'll dive into our live questions here.
Sure.
So I think it is invaluable to be part of a group like Flight Path Vectors.
Well,
so
thank you.
I think I would encourage anyone anywhere in their career in aviation to follow these guys. They are fantastic mentors, and I think that it is certainly a group that they're only going to propel your career faster and farther than you can probably do by yourself. Like, these guys are phenomenal.
Well, another common thing is no one in aviation does it by themselves.
Right.
I had a huge laundry list of people that helped me.
Yeah. I think that's why you guys in Flight Path Vectors specifically, it's a lot of the mentality of pay it forward. I think that you see all the time out of you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things. So just be, all those are watching, just be careful who you fly with. That person you fly with may be your next chief pilot.
Sure.
So that's definitely true. So
definitely,
it's a very small community. I cannot believe how small the pilot community, the aviation pilot community is. Very small.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about the LOFT program, or?
Yeah, absolutely, we can. So I think that spoke specifically. This is something that we worked together actually on building for. It is said here on this slide, for those military guys that you had honed in on specifically with maybe the guard units out there, right, or the reserve guys that need a way to get from where they are now to eligible for higher ed.
Absolutely. So again, we talked about the gap between the military operations and civilian operations.
Mm-hmm.
What's the way that they can kind of get some information about that? B, maybe get some flight time to bridge the gap between 300-400 hours to that 750 mark, because it may not be the best opportunity to be a CFI or do something else on the civilian side to build hours. So to maximize your time hey, I'm going to get some line-oriented flight training. So I'm going to understand how an airline works in that environment and build that flight time to get there, so that you don't have to wait until you get that 750 hours. How many years you're going to wait to get that, versus I can build this in a short amount of time and I can get to the airlines quicker, because that idea that your seniority at an airline is key. The quicker you get that seniority number, the better your life will be. So the idea is build those hours, bridge that gap, get some good quality training, and get your seniority number, best case scenario.
Yeah, and I think there's even another twist, especially from guys at some of the major airlines that are getting closer to retirement now. I think a lot of times the perspective is not just about quality of life, but the fact that you age out, right, at 65. And so if you spend an extra 3 years now getting into the job, that's basically 3 years of senior captain pay that you're going to lose on the back end.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So, and again, you want to get down here as quick as you can. So the hiring is only going to get better. That I can say,
sure,
concretely. The hiring will only get better in the foreseeable future, barring any kind of catastrophe, unseen for catastrophe. So yes, you want to, they're highly skilled. It's just the numbers that they need to get. So get some good quality training, bridge that gap, and keep moving forward smartly.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Excellent. I think we should jump over here. Let me pull up the question piece. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
And now is definitely the time. It looks like we have quite a few questions coming in. So down below, there's like a little question section. Feel free, you can type out whatever questions you might have, and we're going to get through a few of these. I don't know if we can get through everything. It depends on how many we get. We have about 100 people currently attending, so we gotta. I don't know how many we'll get, but we'll get to as many as we can. And if we can't, we'll answer your questions offline by email or whatever. So let's take a look here real quick. There was a question relating to. Let me see. Talk to somebody. Okay, well, want to talk to somebody to flight school afterwards. Okay, that's fine. There you go. Okay. I have read that by the summer of 23, there will be a deficit of 12,000 pilots in the U.S. for commercial, corporate, etc. After all the furlough pilots are brought back. Is this believable? From James.
Okay, well, James, thank you for the question. So let's talk about the airline career. 65 is when you got to retire. That's a hard number. There is some talks of extending it, but that's no longer here or there. So right now it's 65. So given the metric of 65, and with the assumption that every pilot will go to 65, right now, as far as the FAA database is showing, January 2025 is the start of a historic year. They're saying 19,863 pilots are scheduled to reach the age of 65 in 2025. That being said, that's going to be the peak, if you will, of people reaching that age as being in commercial aviation. Now, again, the assumption is everyone's going to make it to 65. I can tell you there is a lot of pilots medical out before they're 65. Number may be higher. Now, what the COVID crisis did do is it provided an opportunity for the airlines to offer early retirements. So pilots that were not, that were normally scheduled to retire at 65 took the early retirements. And every airline had some retirement package of certain flavors. But typically there was, a good contingent of pilots who were not in that 65 group who took the earliest, in their mid to late 50s, let's say. There was a couple that were even younger who decided to exit the airline industry and took an early retirement. So that number actually may be higher. They're projecting it to be in 2025 upwards of 21,000. So is it believable that there's going to be mass exodus of pilots in these years coming? Yes, and it is scheduled to start at around 2023 to extend down to 2027, with the peak year being 2025. What does that mean for us? Well, the bulk of the people retiring are coming from the major airlines. They're there. So you want to, look at your career, and you want to be on the front side of that wave. So do whatever you can to get hired at a major airline 2025 or earlier. That would be the difference between a good career and a great career. Timing.
Yeah, so I mean, to the point about seniority and how important it is, obviously, if you're able to watch yourself move up a seniority list even faster, life becomes wildly different.
And a little more safe. The further up the pecking list you are, the further insulated you are for any kind of downturns, because the airline is cyclical. Yeah. There's ups and downs. And the idea is have as many pilots junior to you as possible, so in those downtimes, you don't get furloughed.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking at. That makes sense. How does that answer your questions, James?
Good. So another interesting one. Is it required to have a bachelor's degree to get hired by the airlines? Because everyone I speak to about it have different points of view on this, or is it just a plus to have a degree?
Okay, so depends on the airline you go to. That's the short answer. Most airlines require, they actually listed in the job description, to have a 4-year degree. Some say preferred. Now, preferred is, they'd like you to have it, But now we have to see is what's competitive.
Yep.
So the airline major airline I work at, I would say about 3% do not have a 4-year degree.
Wow.
But they have other skill sets that kind of bridge the gap. They're test pilots for whatever airline or aircraft manufacturer. They have other skill sets that kind of bridges that gap.
Okay.
But again, the airline I work at, 3% do not have a 4-year degree. Now that's a major. Do regional airlines require a 4-year degree? I would say no, they don't. They say preferred. But if you want to continue your career, again, it would behoove you to get your 4-year degree to become competitive.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't think that number is too dramatically different for a lot of the major carriers.
No, I don't believe so. Well, I mean, Delta, they want you to have.
I think Delta absolutely is probably 100%.
Is 100%. And again, Delta wants you to have a specific degree program. So you can't have an online degree. Yeah. They want you to go to an actual brick and mortar school. It has to be a specific brick and mortar school with certain accreditations. And you have to finish it in 4 consecutive years or less.
Sure.
Well, good luck.
Good luck. Maybe that could change in the future. It could change. They need hiring.
Absolutely. But for right now, and they haven't changed it historically. Is it impossible? No, absolutely not. But it'll definitely change your decision tree for where you want to go and what you're doing.
Sure. Okay. So next is Faith. Faith asks, I'm a flight instructor in 500 hours so far. I've been ready. I will be ready around 2023. What would you suggest for me to do now while building hours? What do you think about hiring projections for 2023?
Well, barring anything's happening, anything catastrophic, again, just by sheer numbers, with the start of all the retirements, again, with the assumption everyone goes to 65, it's been my experience now that very few people go to 65. There's a lot of people who medical out or they cash in all their vacation and retire at 63. So, I mean, that's just the truth. They have so much saved up that I can get 2 years of salary just to be on vacation for my last 2 years of my career. What should you be doing now? Well, you should be looking at your career in its totalness. Okay? So I want you to think about, Faith, where do you want to go for your major airline? I want you to look at their requirements. And I want you to start looking and filling in the requirements that they are looking for. Because anything that a major is looking for is good for a regional as well. Okay, so you really don't just start looking at the next step. You do not have the installation of time to recover from bad decisions. So, before historically, when I was coming through, I knew I was going to be in a regional for over a decade, and I had a lot of time to kind of correct things. You hopefully will not have that time. You have to make decisions now and say, okay, I need, ABC 1, 2, 3 at this major airline. Where can I fill those requirements now and at a regional to make those? Because if you're going to wait till you get to a regional airline and start looking at a major, it's very competitive at a regional airline. Everyone is looking at those boxes, and it's very, very, very competitive. So you could be working, 4, 5 times harder to do that, where you can be filling those requirements now.
Excellent. Okay. Next question is from Seth. So if regional airlines are going to be flying more than international, would there be more competition in getting jobs at the regional airlines?
So the regional airlines, they will fill their ranks, and of course, their ranks will be filled in conjunction with how many people that are leaving, going to other entities. Regional airlines typically don't have huge numbers of retirements. So, that's kind of like the major airline type thing. So once the majors start hiring, or larger entities hiring, FedEx, UPS, ATI, ABEX, Amazon, and they start absorbing the pilots out of the regionals, they're going to start hiring a lot more. So the good news is, on the cargo side, they are fairly consistently hiring right now. I said, UPS is still getting delivery of brand new airplanes. It's very plausible that they're going to start leaning more on the regionals, and again plausible again with the new airplanes that regional airlines are accepting. They may have new route structures, talking with their partners, and more opportunity there. So is it going to be competitive? It's still going to be competitive. I won't lie to you, but it's has a bright future.
Absolutely. And I mean, even in addition to that, I think the growth you're seeing out of some of the other LCCs in the U.S., besides cargo, right, that some of these LCCs are opportunistic for a lot of guys because they have small pilot pools now, but they have pretty expansive growth projections.
Oh, absolutely.
Huge aircraft orders and the like. So it's a kind of an interesting proposition to maybe get on at one of those LCCs with the understanding that maybe within a few years you could be at nearly half of the hiring, the seniority list.
I think the big quiet mover in the industry right now is Spirit Airlines.
Yeah,
Spirit, JetBlue, and Frontier.
Yeah,
I mean they are quietly moving around, and they have some significant growth potential and hiring potential right there. And given the recent contracts, Spirit specifically, it is not a bad place to be. I mean, everyone has this classic look. I'm going to regional, I'm going to a major, and they look at that specifically. Yeah. There's other choices.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of contacts at Spirit, and they like being there. I don't think Spirit's going away anytime soon.
No.
So
definitely not.
It's just looking at that. Again, low cost carriers, ultra low cost carriers, they do bring a lot to the table. So give it a look.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely not something that most people starting off in their career think about.
No.
But I think once you get to the regional space, it starts to become the buzz, right? Of like, well, I could get on at a place like Frontier pretty quick, and if I did, I could upgrade in a couple of years, and I could be pretty high in seniority and be wherever I wanted. Sure, pretty fast.
Sure, and they're not bad places to be. I mean, I have not heard too many squawks of people being there that are terribly dismayed or unhappy.
Right. Culture it's growing as the company grows, and so you're in this growth mode, and people get excited about that.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. So, another question: would we stand out more if we go to an aeronautics college like Embry-Riddle?
If you want to go to Delta, yes. Delta holds Embry-Riddle in very hard regard as far as hierarchy. Is one of the colleges that they like you to see. I went to Embry-Riddle. I got my degree at Embry-Riddle. I didn't do my flying there, but I ended up finishing my degree there. Do I feel that the education was more than ASU or UND? I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I would say the product that all of them put out is fairly even. It's fairly on par. But, I mean, there is something at Embry-Riddle, the Aeronautical University. That's all they do. Yeah. It's not an afterthought where they have a law school and they also do an aviation department. Embry-Riddle has been, aviation based, through and through. So does it look better? If you want to go to Delta, yes, it does look better. If you're looking for anywhere else, I would say, unless you have a burning desire to go there, then go. I mean, if you have an ASU degree, places like United or Southwest will not hold that against you.
Sure.
So I hope that answers your question.
Good. There's another question. When do you think SkyWest will resume hiring? So AeroGuard has a program with SkyWest Airlines. We do kind of like a cadetship program with them, and I've been asking this question a lot. As of right now, they have guaranteed they're going to hire in 2021, and it's a question of when. So I can also tell you that some of our instructors that had transitioned there last year, that kind of got displaced in the middle of training before they could get online, they've been recalled and they're back finishing their training now. So if you had to put together all of that information, I would estimate that probably by the second half of this year sometime, I would assume SkyWest would be hiring. Could be sooner, but I
I would say it's a safe bet to assume the second half of this year, you could expect to see them higher.
Sure. I think that's fair. But, the bigger question is, where are you in that process?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to wait for them to start hiring to start getting your resume done or have your application reviewed, then you're behind the power curve. I mean, at this point right now, the only thing you should be doing is changing your medical, changing your flight hours. You should be ready to go at a moment's notice. So if the hiring window opens, tomorrow morning, you're going to be first on the list, and those who press update are going to be reviewed first. And so, these are things you need to be preparing yourself. Again, don't expect a countdown that we're going to be opening up in 10 days, 9 days. It's probably not going to happen. It'll just be a one day, you don't hear anything, the next day it's open. So you have to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that seems to be the case. So I cannot stress that enough. And I think that it's interesting because once again, we think of, I can put a resume together, tonight and ship it off tomorrow, no big deal. But it's not just about that actual sheet of paper, but the things that are on that sheet of paper, and maybe these letters of recommendation that are going behind that, and any other pieces of documentation that you need to acquire that do take time, maybe even getting your own PRIA or whatever.
Absolutely.
Those all don't happen overnight.
They don't.
You building this one sheet of resume, right?
Exactly. So if you haven't pulled your PRIA report, if you haven't pulled your driving record, and you put your resume together, you might not be telling the story that the airline sees. So your resume should be based off of what the airline's going to see. So everyone to understand PRIA is a Pilot Reporting Information Act. It's basically the information database that the FAA keeps on every single pilot in the United States. If you have not got that, and that's what the airline is going to see when they interview you. And your resume and your application best mirror what they see. So if you haven't pulled that and there's things on that report that you have not disclosed or did not know was there, you're doing yourself a disservice. So that takes some time. The other thing is, I want to stress to people is, airline resumes have specific formats. It is not just I'm going to do this on whatever format looks great. Every airline has a very different format of what they're looking for. So have you done your due diligence to figure out what that is?
Interesting, right?
Yeah, interesting. And that's what we do at Flight Path Vectors, to make sure that you're
actually prepared.
You're actually prepared. I mean, the thing, and to the people, flight trust, they just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, I'll be honest with you, when I did my airline stuff, I didn't know until they told me, said, yeah, it looks great, but that's not what we're looking for. I'm like, ooh, what are you looking for? Well, it has to look like this.
Wow.
Oh, I did not know that. That looks horrible. Mine looks prettier, but that's not what they're looking. They're not looking for pretty. They're looking for this format.
Yeah. So there's a certain amount of information that they can retrieve
in 7 seconds or less.
Right.
Exactly.
You want to know what the important information is. Okay, another question, kind of interesting. How many hours total time can you begin to seek an interview, and is there anything else that can be done to get on the radar of these companies prior to having the total time required?
Well, absolutely. It's very interesting now with technology and these third-party vendors that are, pilot credentials or whatever else. There's an actual counter now where they actually see how often you're interacting. So that's how they gauge, are you still interested or not?
Wow.
So if they see your application, there hasn't been any movement in 3 months, they're like, well, they're probably not interested anymore. So you have to show activity for what they're doing. So is there a metric to be like, well, should I be updating my stuff daily, weekly, monthly? I would say enough to show that there's activity that you are still interested in there.
Sure. Okay.
So there's that. So if you're at 1,000 hours and they're saying, hey, this person's still actively interested in moving, and then your time comes, you have your hour requirements, that's a definite plus.
Okay.
The other thing is, what can you be doing right now? Build relationships.
Yeah.
Build relationships. Again, no one does this by themselves. Build the relationships with people who have gone before you. Maybe your flight instructors at an airline you want to be at. Maintain that relationship. Hey, you have some friends there. Maintain that relationship. It's it's one of those things where you have to, lean on people to help, because at some point someone's going to be calling you to say, hey, you're at this airline. How is it? Hey, cool. Hey, let me help you out. Yep. So what can you be doing? Building relationships.
And I would say it does seem like if you're not in the airline scene, it does seem like you feel like an outsider in a lot of cases. And so understand that it's very rare to meet an airline pilot that is not approachable, that you can't go up to and say, hey, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I'm really interested in flying for X, whoever you're flying for. Like, I'd love to take you out to dinner. Do you have any time at any point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of them are generally very open and receptive to, yeah, I'd love to see you get online, or like,
let's make it happen.
More. Right.
Let's make it happen. Absolutely. So, and again, we're very big on that at Flight Path Vectors, helping connect people to make sure that you're in the right direction and you're moving forward. Good. So I cannot understate that or overstate that. Just build relationships.
I think the networking piece is hugely important for anything in the aviation industry. It's extremely valuable to continue networking. What kind of services does Flight Path Vectors offer?
Oh, okay. It's good for you. It's good. So let's historically we've been helping candidates come in. One, helping them make sure that they're best prepared for success from the get-go, whether it's setting up for your first medical, whether it's, hey, where should I go? We help candidates that we send to Flight Path Vectors and other entities as well, because everyone's different and everyone has different wants and needs, and we help tailor make that to where they need to go. And we help facilitate those conversations and help facilitate them moving forward. We help along the entire way. We have candidates that call up, hey, I have a check ride. What should I be doing? Okay, we sit down with them and kind of help guide them through their first check rides. We help them make sure that, establish, certain baseline norms, like you're going to wear a uniform. Okay, you're going to have to be punctual and kind of establish what it means to be an airline pilot, and start getting those behaviors and from the get-go, so as they progress, they become more ingrained. We help, they ask questions, hey, what should I do to get to this airline? And we sit them down and say, well, let's look what this airline's looking for, and we start building a map to get them to that airline specifically. Or someone comes up and says, I don't know what airline I want to go to. I have no idea. So we sit them down and explain what's important to you. And, we've had some candidates who are like, hey, I want to be based in Atlanta. That is the culmination of my airline. That's all I want. Well, okay, let's look at airlines that are based in Atlanta and get you over there.
Yeah.
So it depends. Or some people, I want to fly a 767. I mean, that is their whole focus. I just want to fly that airplane. Okay, let's look at airlines that fly 76s. Let's make sure they're going to be in service for X amount of years and get you there. Let's do that. And we kind of talk to them about that and talk to them about retirements. We talk to them, hey, contracts, how it all works. That's what we do. And we help maintain why you're doing this, because it's fairly common when, as a pilot, you're going through training or you're just flight instructor, you're going through the day-to-day minutia, and you lose sight of why am I doing this?
Yeah,
it's mundane, and it's very easy to get unmotivated. Very easy to just be like, forget this. And we kind of just reignite that fire. Hey, keep going, keep doing this. You're on the right path. Keep moving forward. Keep chipping at it. And again, we kind of guard away from bad habits.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, I've had this conversation far too many times already. Is do not get a DUI. And it sounds kind of funny and easy, but it's a conversation that we have, and we make sure that you're protecting your career.
It is. It's one of those things that shouldn't have to be said, but you got to say it. Because,
you got to say it. I mean,
you want it always at the forefront of your mind, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, you have to look at, pilots are typically type A people.
Yep.
They're driven. They're going. They're go-getters.
Yep.
They like to have a good time.
It's true.
You know, they work hard and they play hard. That's just that's just the nature of it. So it's a conversation that we have to have.
Sure.
So that's that in a broad stroke, we do flight path vectors. In the end of the day, my job is to make sure you're successful and to make sure that you're the most marketable pilot, that there should be no reason this airline's going to look at you and be like, absolutely, this person is it. We want them.
Certainly. Okay. I think that is great. There was, okay, so the questions just keep coming in, so we're not even close to halfway yet. Okay. So I think we can maybe do like one or two more questions, and then I think what we'll do is figure out a way. I'll have everybody. We'll have contact details for everybody that registered. So certainly we can reach out to you guys. We'll have your questions that are recorded, so we can certainly reach out and we can answer or address your questions specifically after this webinar is over. But let's see if I can find a couple more questions here that stand out that kind of touch on other subjects or new areas.
Good job, Eric. You're reading those really fast.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. So another one kind of around flight path vectors. Can we receive membership from flight path vectors directly? If so, how would we get in touch?
Well, right now we have our Instagram page and our Facebook. Drop us a line. We'll get you on the rolls and see what we can do to help you.
There you go. So, and I can email all of you the links for their Facebook page and their Instagram page.
Yes, and we're starting to learn. It's very difficult to get a graphic designer and a website designer that wants to do what you want to do. So we do apologize for that. We are trying to work on our website, but it's proving a lot more difficult.
Fair enough. Well,
I'm a pilot. I'm not a computer programmer.
I can completely understand.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, interesting. I'm currently 26 and I got my commercial pilot license, airplane single engine land. Is it too late for me to get to the airlines?
No.
Easy answer. No.
Absolutely not. If you have nothing to inhibit you, no medical, nothing as far as any felonies or DUIs, absolutely go hit it. Is it worth it? Yes. The short answer is yes. Are you too old? No.
You can get in. There are folks that want to do it, and it's not necessarily about always getting to fly a 787 at United, right? Like guys get in later in life, and then they realize quality of life at a regional airline becomes pretty good, pretty quick at some of the regionals, and maybe that's copacetic enough, right? Like that might be kind of the niche for you, and the thought of going to a major just seems like a lot of extra work for the last whatever 15 or 20 years that may not be worth it to you.
Sure. 26, are you too old? No. I mean, if you want to talk on the financial side, I mean, we do seminars. We talk to people and they say, is it feasible for me to do this? I'm like, well, for what we do, we work 5 months of the year, six if you want.
Yeah.
So we work pretty much half of the year. And if you look at an airline career and you say, well, with the assumption you get to a major airline at 28, so you start flying and you get to an airline, major airline at 28. I mean, you're looking at an average of about I think it was like $14,700 a month. If you break it down, going from until you retire at 65.
Yeah.
Working half a year, 5 to 6 months out of the year. I mean, if that's not worth it, I mean, I don't know what is. I mean, there is the population of people who. I'm a pilot. I love airplanes. I love flying. I love working with people. And I could put those two together. It's great. So it's not about the financial, but there is a population of people who become pilots because they make money. They don't care about airplanes. And they really don't care. They don't think it's cool. Working with people is okay, but I want the dollars.
Right.
So there is that population of people. So the potential to make money at the airlines is It's there.
Fair. Okay. So there's several others that had chimed in with some questions around, they'd shown up late and they're looking to get some sort of like a summary. What I will say is this whole webinar was recorded or is being recorded, so it'll be up online. I know we'll have it on the AeroGuard YouTube channel. I'm sure, as history has been, that Flight Path Vectors tends to have it on their social media as well. So I'm sure it'll be easy access. You can always go back and rewatch any of the parts you may have missed if you had to step away or whatever. As I said, there's loads more questions, but I'm going to go through and kind of disseminate them. I'll have records of who sent which questions, and we'll be reaching out to you guys with any of the answers, whether it was about AeroGuard or whether it's about Flight Path Vectors. We'll be in touch and certainly be able to move you along.
Absolutely. And again, this is our second webinar. The first one, we kind of talked about it, and we kind of put the challenge out there to people saying, what are you doing to get your career prepared? And that was 9 months ago.
Yeah, something like
so if you sat these 8 or 9 months not doing anything, you're getting a little behind the power curve. I'm going to put that challenge out again.
Yeah.
What are you doing to prepare your career, get yourself career, not just the next step, the step after that.
Sure.
So, and if you're just starting right now, you got a lot of work to do. There's some people who are months ahead of you, maybe even years ahead of you, and you just don't have a moment to lose. Okay. So,
very good. Well, Al, thank you very much for your time today. I know that you are a busy guy. You are always doing stuff, whether it's with Flight Path Vectors or flying the line or all kinds of endeavors. So thank you. I appreciate you coming and speaking.
I appreciate you having me. I hope this is a help, and reach out to us at Flight Path Vectors. We're more than happy to help you out.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for participating, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye.